Have you ever noticed how one simple word can completely change the atmosphere in a relationship? That word is no. It's a small word, only 2 letters long, yet it has the power to reveal intentions that years of conversations may never uncover. Healthy boundaries are not walls built to keep people out. They are clear lines that define where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. They protect your peace, your values, your emotional well-being, and your ability to make decisions without fear. Yet when you begin setting those boundaries with someone who has grown accustomed to controlling you, something remarkable happens. Their reaction often tells you more about the relationship than anything they have ever said. Many people believe boundaries create conflict, but the truth is that boundaries don't create problems. They expose problems that were already there. If someone truly respects you, they may not always like every boundary you set, but they will respect your right to have one. They may ask questions, seek understanding, or even feel disappointed for a moment, but they won't make your decision a personal attack against them. A person who genuinely cares about your well-being understands that you have limits, emotions, responsibilities, and the freedom to choose. They recognize that love cannot exist where freedom is absent. Respect and freedom walk together. Control and fear walk together. The difference becomes impossible to ignore once you begin protecting your personal space. For a narcissistic person, however, boundaries represent something entirely different. They are not viewed as healthy expressions of self-respect. Instead, they are often interpreted as acts of rebellion. The issue is rarely about the boundary itself. It is about what the boundary represents. A boundary communicates that you are thinking independently. It says you are making decisions based on your own values instead of someone else's demands. It announces that your emotional health matters just as much as theirs. For someone who has benefited from your constant compliance, that message feels like a threat rather than a healthy adjustment. Imagine someone who has always expected immediate access to your time. Every phone call must be answered. Every request must become your priority. Every crisis becomes your responsibility. At first, you may believe this is simply what caring people do. You sacrifice your schedule, postpone your own needs, and convince yourself that saying yes is proof of love. But over time, exhaustion begins to replace joy. You realize your life revolves around keeping another person satisfied, while your own emotional reserves slowly disappear. Then one day, you calmly explain that you are unavailable, or that you need time for yourself, or that you cannot meet their request this time. You expect disappointment, perhaps even a brief conversation. Instead, you encounter anger, guilt, accusations, or silent treatment. Suddenly, your reasonable limit becomes evidence that you are selfish, uncaring, or ungrateful. This reaction reveals something important. The relationship may never have been built on mutual respect. It may have been built on unrestricted access to your energy. The moment access becomes limited, the emotional atmosphere changes. That doesn't happen because boundaries are wrong. It happens because unhealthy expectations have finally been interrupted. People who rely on control often mistake access for affection. They assume that if they can influence your choices, then the relationship is secure. When that influence weakens, they experience discomfort, not because love has disappeared, but because control has. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they must explain every boundary until the other person approves of it. They spend hours crafting perfect explanations, hoping that if they say the right words, the other person will finally understand. But understanding is not always the problem. Sometimes the boundary is perfectly clear. The resistance comes because the other person understands exactly what it means. They understand they can no longer dictate your schedule, your emotions, your finances, your relationships, or your decisions. No amount of additional explanation will change someone who simply dislikes losing influence. Healthy boundaries also reveal something within ourselves. Many people discover they feel guilty every time they protect their own peace. That guilt often comes from years of conditioning. Perhaps they were taught that putting themselves first was selfish. Perhaps they learned that love meant endless sacrifice. Perhaps they grew up believing their value depended on how useful they were to others. These beliefs make boundary setting feel uncomfortable at first. The discomfort does not mean the boundary is wrong. It often means you are doing something unfamiliar. Growth usually feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. There is a significant difference between kindness and self-abandonment. Kindness is freely choosing to help because it aligns with your values. Self-abandonment is repeatedly ignoring your own needs because you fear someone else's reaction. The two may look similar from the outside, but internally they are completely different. One comes from love, the other comes from fear. Healthy relationships encourage kindness without demanding self-destruction. Unhealthy relationships often expect sacrifice without appreciation. You may also notice that once you begin honoring your boundaries, certain relationships become more distant. This can feel heartbreaking because it may appear as though people are leaving your life, but sometimes they are not leaving because you changed into someone difficult. They are leaving because the version of you they preferred no longer exists. They were comfortable with the person who rarely disagreed, who apologized constantly, who ignored personal limits, and who carried emotional burdens that were never theirs to carry. As you become healthier, those unhealthy patterns lose their place. While this transition can be painful, it is also deeply revealing. It shows which relationships were built on mutual care and which were built on unequal expectations. Setting boundaries is not about punishing anyone. It is not about proving a point or winning an argument. It is about taking responsibility for your own emotional health. You cannot control whether another person agrees with your limits, but you can decide whether you will continue betraying yourself to maintain temporary peace. Real peace is never created by abandoning your own well-being. It grows from living honestly, respecting your limits, and refusing to participate in relationships that require you to lose yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Every healthy boundary is a declaration that your life has value, your voice deserves to be heard, and your emotional health is worth protecting, even when others choose not to understand it. One of the most revealing changes you can make in any difficult relationship is to stop reacting emotionally to every attempt to provoke you. This doesn't mean becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally numb. It means learning the difference between feeling your emotions and allowing someone else to control them. Emotional detachment is not about shutting your heart down. It is about refusing to hand someone else the keys to your emotional life. When you reach that place, something remarkable begins to happen. The hidden intentions behind manipulative behavior become much easier to recognize because the distractions begin to disappear. People who rely on manipulation often expect predictable responses. They know which words make you defensive. They know which accusations make you explain yourself for hours. They know which insults make you question your worth. They know which moments of silence make you panic and chase after them. Over time, they learn your emotional patterns, and if you are unaware of what is happening, those patterns become tools they can use whenever they want to regain control. The relationship slowly becomes less about genuine communication and more about managing your reactions. Without realizing it, you begin spending more energy responding to emotional pressure than actually solving problems. Imagine someone who constantly criticizes your decisions. Every choice you make is questioned. If you speak up, they accuse you of being too sensitive. If you stay quiet, they claim you have something to hide. If you defend yourself, they say you are overreacting. No matter what you do, the conversation somehow circles back to making you feel responsible for the conflict. At first, you may believe that if you simply explain yourself better, they will finally understand your heart. So you offer longer explanations. You apologize even when you have done nothing wrong. You replay conversations in your mind, searching for the perfect words that could prevent the next argument. Yet nothing changes. In fact, the more you explain, the more opportunities they seem to find to criticize you. This is where emotional detachment begins to reveal the truth. Instead of reacting with panic, frustration, or desperation, you pause. You listen without immediately defending yourself. You answer only what truly needs to be answered. You stop trying to convince someone who has already decided what they want to believe. Suddenly, the entire conversation feels different. The emotional storm that usually keeps you distracted begins to settle. Without your emotional reaction fueling the exchange, the other person's behavior becomes much more visible. You begin noticing patterns that were hidden beneath the chaos. You realize that many conversations were never designed to reach understanding. They were designed to keep you emotionally occupied. This shift can feel uncomfortable because many people confuse emotional detachment with emotional distance. They worry that remaining calm means they no longer care. In reality, calmness often reflects greater emotional maturity. It means your emotions are no longer making every decision for you. You still feel disappointment, sadness, frustration, or hurt, but those emotions no longer dictate your words or actions in the heat of the moment. Instead of reacting instantly, you respond thoughtfully. That small difference changes everything because thoughtful responses cannot be manipulated as easily as impulsive reactions. One reason emotional detachment is so powerful is that it interrupts unhealthy expectations. A manipulative person often anticipates a familiar cycle. They criticize, you defend. They accuse, you explain. They withdraw, you chase. They become angry, you apologize. Every step follows a predictable script. But when you stop participating in that script, the cycle begins to break apart. They may repeat the criticism more intensely or change their strategy altogether because the old methods are no longer producing the same results. This doesn't mean your calmness is causing the conflict. It means your calmness is exposing how much the relationship depended on your emotional participation. Many people discover that once they stop reacting emotionally, conversations become surprisingly short. Arguments that once lasted hours lose their momentum because there is no longer endless defending, explaining, or proving. Instead of responding to every accusation, you focus only on facts. Instead of trying to correct every misunderstanding, you accept that not every false belief requires your approval or correction. You begin realizing that your peace is more valuable than winning every disagreement. This realization is not weakness. It is wisdom developed through experience. Another important truth becomes clear during this process. Emotional detachment helps separate guilt from responsibility. Manipulative individuals often blend these two ideas together. They convince you that because they feel upset, you must have done something wrong. They imply that their emotions are entirely your responsibility to fix. Over time, you begin carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to carry. But as you become emotionally grounded, you recognize an important distinction. You can care about someone's feelings without accepting blame for every feeling they experience. Compassion does not require constant self-condemnation. Understanding another person's pain does not mean surrendering your own emotional health. This perspective also strengthens your ability to recognize genuine accountability. Healthy relationships include honest apologies, respectful conversations, and mutual effort. Emotional detachment does not eliminate accountability. It actually makes accountability clearer because you are no longer responding from panic or fear. When you make a mistake, you can admit it sincerely without feeling that your entire identity is under attack. At the same time, when accusations are unfair or manipulative, you no longer feel compelled to confess to things you did not do simply to restore temporary peace. One of the greatest benefits of emotional detachment is the return of personal clarity. Constant emotional pressure creates confusion. It becomes difficult to trust your own judgment because every decision is filtered through someone else's approval or criticism. You question your memory, your motives, and even your character. But when emotional manipulation loses its grip, your thinking gradually becomes clearer. You begin noticing inconsistencies that once escaped your attention. You remember conversations more accurately. You recognize repeated patterns instead of isolated incidents. What once felt confusing begins to make sense because your mind is no longer consumed by emotional survival. This process also transforms the relationship you have with yourself. Instead of constantly monitoring another person's mood, you begin paying attention to your own emotional needs. You notice when you feel peaceful, when you feel anxious, and when certain interactions consistently leave you emotionally drained. These observations become valuable guides. Rather than ignoring your inner voice, you begin respecting it. Your confidence slowly returns, not because someone else finally validates you, but because you have learned to trust your own judgment again. Emotional detachment is not about becoming indifferent to people. It is about becoming deeply committed to truth. It allows you to love without losing yourself, to care without surrendering your identity, and to remain compassionate without becoming emotionally controlled. As emotional reactions lose their power over your decisions, hidden motives become easier to recognize, unhealthy patterns become impossible to ignore, and the truth about the relationship begins to reveal itself with a clarity that emotional chaos could never provide. One of the greatest mistakes people make when trying to understand someone is believing their words more than their patterns. Words are powerful, and they can comfort, inspire, encourage, and heal. But words can also distract, manipulate, confuse, and create false hope when they are not supported by consistent actions. This is especially true in relationships where manipulation is present. Someone can speak with confidence, promise lasting change, express deep remorse, and even appear completely sincere in the moment. Yet if their behavior never changes, those words eventually lose their meaning. Character is not revealed by what a person says during an emotional conversation. It is revealed by what they repeatedly choose to do when no one is forcing them to change. Many people become trapped in unhealthy relationships because they continue believing potential instead of reality. They hold on to the version of a person they hope will eventually appear instead of honestly looking at the person standing in front of them today. They remember the beautiful promises, the heartfelt apologies, the emotional speeches, and the moments when everything seemed different. Those memories become powerful enough to overshadow months or even years of repeated disappointment. Instead of asking, "What has this person consistently shown me?" they ask, "What if this time is different?" Hope, while beautiful in healthy situations, can become dangerous when it blinds us to repeated evidence. A manipulative person often understands the emotional power of words. They know that carefully chosen sentences can temporarily calm conflict. They may apologize with tears in their eyes. They may promise they have finally changed. They may say they never meant to hurt you, that they finally understand your pain, or that things will be completely different from now on. In that moment, every word may sound genuine. You may want to believe them because your heart longs for peace. You may convince yourself that this conversation is the turning point you've been waiting for. But after a few days or weeks, the familiar patterns quietly return. The criticism begins again. The blame shifts back onto you. The disrespect slowly reappears. Nothing has truly changed except the words that were spoken. This is why actions always carry greater weight than promises. Actions require commitment. Words require only intention. Anyone can promise patience during a conversation. Living with patience day after day requires discipline and genuine transformation. Anyone can say they value honesty. Choosing honesty when it is uncomfortable reveals whether that value is real. Anyone can claim they respect your boundaries. Respecting them consistently, especially when they are inconvenient, demonstrates true character. Real change is not measured by emotional moments. It is measured by consistent choices repeated over time. One reason people struggle to trust actions over words is because actions often unfold slowly. Words are immediate. They provide instant relief. An apology can calm emotional pain within minutes. A promise can restore hope almost instantly. But behavior unfolds over days, weeks, months, and even years. Observing patterns requires patience. It requires resisting the urge to make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. It asks you to become an observer rather than simply a participant. Instead of focusing on what someone says they will become, you begin paying attention to who they repeatedly show themselves to be. Think about trust for a moment. Trust is rarely destroyed by one mistake. It is usually weakened through repeated inconsistencies. Likewise, trust is not rebuilt through one heartfelt apology. It is rebuilt through repeated consistency. Imagine someone who has repeatedly broken promises. One day, they sincerely apologize and promise never to repeat those actions. Their words may sound convincing, but genuine trust does not instantly return because trust depends on evidence. Every day they choose honesty, every time they keep their word, every moment they respect your boundaries, they slowly build new evidence. Trust grows through consistency, not emotion. Without consistent action, even the most beautiful apology becomes little more than another conversation. Patterns also reveal priorities. People often say, "You matter to me," but their behavior tells a different story. If someone consistently makes time for everything except the relationship they claim is important, Their priorities become visible. If they repeatedly dismiss your feelings while insisting they care deeply about you, their actions reveal more than their declarations ever could. This is not about expecting perfection. Every human being makes mistakes. Every relationship experiences misunderstandings. The difference lies in the overall pattern. Healthy people make mistakes but strive to correct them. Manipulative individuals often repeat the same harmful behaviors while expecting their words to erase the consequences. Another important lesson is learning to separate isolated incidents from established patterns. Everyone has difficult days. Everyone occasionally says something they regret or reacts poorly under stress. Wisdom requires recognizing that one mistake does not define an entire person. At the same time, repeated behavior cannot be dismissed as isolated incidents forever. When the same harmful actions continue despite repeated conversations, apologies, and opportunities to change, those actions become a pattern. Patterns tell the truth because they reveal what someone consistently chooses when faced with similar situations. Many people ignore patterns because accepting them feels painful. Admitting that someone's actions contradict their words may require letting go of dreams, expectations, or years invested in the relationship. It may force difficult decisions that feel overwhelming. As a result, the mind naturally searches for explanations that preserve hope. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe next time will be different. While compassion is valuable, endless excuses can become barriers to truth. There comes a point when wisdom requires accepting repeated evidence instead of constantly searching for new explanations. Observing actions instead of clinging to words also protects your emotional health. It prevents you from being swept away by every emotional conversation. Instead of making decisions based on how inspired you feel after hearing promises, you wait to see whether those promises become reality. This patience is not cynicism. It is discernment. Discernment allows you to appreciate sincere words while understanding that genuine transformation must eventually become visible through consistent behavior. Living by this principle also changes the way you evaluate yourself. It reminds you that your own character is revealed through your daily choices, not merely your intentions. Good intentions are meaningful, but they are incomplete without action. If you value kindness, kindness should become visible in your behavior. If you value integrity, your decisions should reflect honesty even when honesty is costly. If you value respect, your treatment of others should remain consistent regardless of convenience. In this way, actions become the visible expression of the values you claim to hold. When you begin paying attention to patterns rather than isolated words, confusion gradually fades. You no longer feel trapped between someone's promises and your painful experiences because you recognize that consistent behavior carries the greatest truth. Actions remove the need for endless guessing. They reveal priorities, intentions, values, and character with remarkable clarity. While words can inspire hope, it is repeated, faithful, and consistent action that ultimately reveals who a person truly is.